Hi, this is Tim from Fiorucci Fabrications, here with Lowbrow for another season of Saturday Sportster, Ironhead Edition. It's something you don't want. Welcome to another edition of Saturday Sportster. So for this project, we're starting off with a 900 Ironhead Sportster, and Ironheads are still pretty inexpensive to get. They're definitely the least expensive vintage Harley to buy, and they make cool old choppers. So we're going to show you how to use a bunch of the parts that we have for Ironheads available at lowbrowcustoms.com. You can use all the parts in this video. You can just use a few, but it's up to you to make your bike look as cool as you want. So we'll be using a stock swing arm Ironhead Sportster frame with Lowbrow's bolt-on hardtail kit that fits 67 to 78 Ironhead Sportsters, and if you don't know the difference with that, it's for electric start. Ironheads are notorious for being chopped up, so if you're not certain that your frame is original, I want to go through a few things of how to identify that this is going to fit for you, or what frame that you have. All the details are basically in your rear motor mount. See how this has a jog right behind the rear motor mount for the seat tubes to come up. This is the electric style Ironhead frame. They've moved that back for all the electric start stuff to fit. The early kick-only frames, it comes straight up vertically from the rear motor mount section. And when they moved everything back, it pushed the entire rear section of your frame backwards and moved back the shock mount location. The Lowbrow hardtails bolt to this shock mount location, so you need to be able to determine that you have the right one for it to fit on your frame. This frame is an electric start frame which fits the 67 to 78 Lowbrow hardtails. If you do have an earlier style kick-only frame, there's another option available for you at lowbrowcustoms.com. Before you really start getting to making stuff, a good practice is to get your tire selection and wheels all ready to go as if you were bolting your bike together for the last time. You don't want to mount your fender on a tire that you're not going to use, because then you won't be able to get the proper fitment to it. So for the rear, we're using a 4.5/18 Coker Classic Diamond tread, and it's got a cool vintage look and it'll fit the look of the bike really nice. For the front, we're using this Lowbrow 21 spool, and we went with the Firestone 21 by 275, and that I think matches the rear nicely and has a cool tread pattern, really vintage, kind of racy. I think it'll look good on this bike. First things first, we're going to fit our hardtail section onto our stock frame, and we're going to get this motor out of the way so I can make some cuts and stuff and don't have to worry about this getting all messed up. Think it's steady enough? I'm going to put a strap on that. Yeah, well, make sure your motor is secure. Look at this thing. This is the Ironhead cart. Oh. Not my clutch. Hey John, thanks for this motor. That's better, okay. These Lowbrow hardtails are great. They come with all the hardware that you're going to need. The two up top to fit into your shocks, and then the two at the bottom to fit where the center stand used to go, or say your exhaust mount. So what's also great about this hardtail is that it fits your stock axle adjusters, and if say yours are wasted, you can get new ones at Colony, brand new chrome, or they also have cab plated depending on the look that you want. So to get this hardtail to fit, there's a couple things that you need to do. The first part, we're going to have to cut these ears off of the rear section of the frame. These ears were originally to bolt your struts on for your rear fender, but since we're not going to be using any of that, they need to go. For the bottom, I'd measured before we put this on, and there's some globs of paint and stuff that's going to keep me from getting this on. It's nice to have a nice smooth surface to bolt this onto, so it's good practice just to clean the paint off and to get this thing to bolt up properly. All right, let's get to work. So when you're cutting this, There's big bosses on the actual frame for you to follow to make it look nice. You can cut it a little big, it's kind of up to you. I'm just gonna rough cut this and then grind it in a little bit closer with my grinder. There's a lot of space on the hardtails, and so you can get this to fit without having it be perfect. You could take it on a couple times so you don't cut off too much. So let's get to cutting. Oh, did you hate that, bud? All right, now we're gonna clean it up. So when I'm radiusing this, I'm just trying to follow the round part of the casting just to kind of match it on the outside without having to remove too much material. So you see this little gap. I'm staying close and just trying to match this, the radius of the boss. I think that looks pretty good. Whatever you do, you just kind of want to make a match. I've seen people leave these square and just kind of slightly radius them, but I chose to radius them all the way, but it's really up to you. The next step is to clean off the paint off the bottom. Now that we're all cleaned up, we're ready to bolt this thing together. I did want to mention, just before I do so, that if you're using the kick-only frame with the earlier style KR hardtail, you don't exactly need to cut these, the strut mounts off if you don't want to, just so you can keep your frame original. The longer tabs fit under the castings and will actually bolt to your frame. This style frame, this style hardtail, you do have to cut it off, but it's a good idea to try to fit it before you start cutting anything away, just to make sure that it does need to be cut. So now we're going to bolt the lowbrow hardtail onto our stock frame using all the hardware provided. So I'm going to bolt in the top first because that's going to help pivot the bottom into place, and which will seriously make things a lot easier because the bottom is designed to fit pretty tight. So you're going to have to use maybe some, like a rubber mallet or something like that, to tap that into position. You want it to fit tight. You don't want it to be loosey-goosey because it does line up the rear section in the frame. So get that top mounted into place, and we're gonna just basically tap this in. There we go. Once you get close, you can start sticking some bolts in. What is that? Yeah, it's a loud thing. All right. And man, look at that. Now you got a hardtail. That's cool that it just bolts right on. It looks nice too. I like the length. I haven't seen these hardtails installed yet. Well, the great thing about using one of these hardtails is you're still using your stock front half of your frame, and so all your other parts should still bolt to it. Like if you wanted to run the stock tank, you could, it still has a seat pivot for a stock style seat, which might need a little bit of fabrication in the rear, but you could use something in the front. Your stock motor mount fits. When you use like an aftermarket frame, you can't just buy a lot of parts off the shelf. So this will be great. Great start for a pretty easy bike with no welding needed. So the next step, we're gonna put the motor in the frame, and I'm gonna show you a little trick on how to make that a quick and easy process. Man, that thing's nice. I like it. I really like it. It looks like a fucking chopper frame. Those are cool. So while this is just a frame, we're gonna bolt the kickstand on just to make it a little easier. It's way easier to put this on when the motorcycle's apart and not when there's a motor in it. So we're gonna do that now, and I just noticed with trying to fit it that there was a little bit of rust and stuff to keep this from moving freely, so I'm just gonna clean this off before I bolt it on. That's better. So we got a kickstand from Drag Specialties, and we have one of the Cycle Standard springs, and we're gonna bolt this on. When you bolt your kickstand on, you wanna put the spring on first, just to make it easy, because you have leverage when the kickstand's off, but not, it's really hard to install the spring after the kickstand's on. So you kinda wanna wiggle this into place and drop this spacer in. And there you go. And then the bolt goes in from the bottom. Perfecto. Now that I have the kickstand on, I'm going to get the frame out of the way and put the motor on the lift and show you this cool trick on how to bolt the motor into the frame without having to fight with it. These things don't get any heavier. Oh my God. Okay. All right, so the first thing you're gonna do is I would put down some blankets like I have here, because we're gonna lay the motor on its side, and you don't wanna scratch up, say if your primary is a nice chrome and everything else is just good practice. So just put down some padding. It's gonna lay this on its side. This was a running motor out of a running bike, so we're probably gonna get a little bit of oil, which I'm sure you would probably have too if your motor came out of a running bike. So we're gonna set this down. I still have some oil lines, and we capped them to keep oil from coming out. So, so as you can see, I laid it down on the primary side because that's the direction that the motor goes in and out of the frame, because the rear section of the motor actually wraps around the rear motor mount in your frame. And so the motor actually gets installed from the left side of the bike. So we're going to replicate that with the bike on its side. So you're going to just take your frame and you're going to wiggle it around your bike. And that's it. So we're going to start with the through bolts, because those are going to be easier to get into, and different years of Ironhead frames have different style mounting locations. So we get that one in, get a nut on it, and then we have these fine thread, 3/8 fine, that actually thread into your rear motor mount, which your stock bolts should still work unless you wanted to clean them up, because we did not change the rear motor mount. And you might have to just wiggle it a little bit, but this is way easier than trying to move your motor around. That going in. No, it was not going in. Okay, one other trick. There we go. Where's that 2x4 at? When you're doing it like this, the frame's going to want to tip and sag in the front, so it's good practice to maybe just try to put something underneath of it that holds it a little straight. There we go. I think that should be good, yeah. There we go. Just to take the weight off of the backside. Damn it, this is not going as easy as I thought. There we go. Okay. Yeah, as you can see, this can be pretty tricky. Okay, now that we have that bolted in, we're going to stand it up. And none of this is tight yet because we still have to bolt in the front. So we're going to get all of this out of the way. Let me take a minute to move some stuff around. One good reason to do it this way is because of your oil pump being on the right side and the lowest point of your motor. When you take it out, it's very common for people to set the whole motor down right on their oil pump, and so if you ever see a crack in your oil pump, you definitely know that the Sportster's been in and out of the frame, because that is a very common problem for the oil pump housing to crack when you've removed your motor. So that's a good thing to check if you don't use the method that I've shown. We have the rear motor mount. It's not even snug, all the bolts are in it, but they're not tight, and we're gonna get the front motor mount plates in. These front motor mount plates are stainless from Gasbox, and really nice fitment, like stock fitment replacement parts, but they're in stainless so you can polish them, they won't rust, and they also have them in Parker, and they also carry one that you can thread an oil filter on, which is also super nice. So the hardware we're using is just the original hardware that came out of the bike when we purchased it, and we're just using it for mock-up. On final assembly, we're gonna replace it with nice fasteners from Colony. We're gonna get the motor mount plates in, and this can be a little tricky if you've never done this before, so I'm gonna show you how to do it. Your front motor mount has a lot of different spacers and washers, and these are gonna be for the front, and I will show you how to use those in a second, but we're gonna start with bolting the motor mount plates on in the rear. So we're gonna start with the top bolt. Usually on all stock stuff, it has a nut welded here because it's a little tricky to get to, but you lose a little bit of your adjustment when this is welded on. So we're gonna get this fit up. Bolt over here. It's a little tricky. There we go. All right. Oh, damn, look at that. I don't need this pry bar at all. So when you're bolting this up, you use the spacer to the small hole, and then the washer actually goes against the motor mount plate to take up the slop in the slot. So you fit these in. Okay, now with everything fit, with your plates in place, I'm gonna tighten up the rear motor mount to the proper spec, and then we're gonna tighten the front motor mount, and then we're gonna attach the top motor mount. Okay, now that those are tight, we're going to snug up the front, and this bottom, the first one, can be a little tricky. You gotta get your wrench in there, but it fits. I almost feel bad showing you this way because Ironheads are usually not this easy to bolt together. I was just commenting off frame that this was the easiest motor I've ever bolted in the frame. So don't be surprised if it needs a little finessing to get it in there. Sometimes these are a little tight and you have to kind of push them apart to get the spacer and the washer inside the frame. And we're not torquing these just yet. We're just snugging them up because we're gonna torque it all down on final assembly. This is just so we can finish putting together the rest of the bike. Okay. For the top motor mount, we went with the Gasbox part. It's a stainless top motor mount that fits your coil and a key switch right on your top motor mount, which makes everything real tidy. Your spark plug wires will be nice and short, same length. To do that, you need to run FXR spark plug wires, and they come in assortment of colors. You can get them in just black, so they're just nice and tidy, super short, and just a really clean look. A great spot to mount your coil. So bolting this on, it takes 2 hardened washers underneath the top motor mount. Your bolts on top, and then see how we have a little bit of gap between the top motor mount and your frame mounting location. You will need to add a spacer to that as well. But it's Harley and their tolerances weren't super tight. So when I bolt on the top motor mount, I like to just stack up a bunch of washers, and then so I can get it tight so I can move on. And then because I'm going to have lots of places where I'm going to want to add spacers to take up slop, so I don't have just a stack up of washers. But to do so, to find my nice height, I'll just do a washer stack up just for mock up and come back later and make something nice. So we got some washers that fit, and I'm just going to throw that in here. Yeah, see, this is why you want to use a spacer instead of washers. There we go. After we get that in there, we're going to tighten this up, and everything on the motor will be torqued, and we're going to work on making this thing a roller. Okay, so we've got our motor completely bolted in, and now we're going to actually attach it to the rear wheel, jack this thing up, and get the rear wheel mounted in the frame. So the next thing, we're going to get the wheel in place. I have 2 jacks underneath the frame because I don't have a front wheel on it, and so I can control the height really easily to get the axle to slip in nicely. And this frame works with all the stock spacers and stuff for your drum. So the first thing you're going to want to do is make sure that you get that the stock spacer in that goes in the slider. And we already bolted in the colony axle adjusters that we're going to use, that the frame's designed to fit with. And we're going to put the axle in, and like I said before, the great part about this frame is all the stock stuff fits. This is a brand new axle, but it is the dimensions and everything from a stock Ironhead Sportster. So we have the axle going through, then we have the stock spacer. There we go, I got and you want to make sure that you're lined up. Get that through. Come up on my jack to line, or come down on my jack to line it up with my axle plate. There we go. And then you have to line up the orientation of the flats to the slot in your axle plate. With adjusting this lift, I got the axle plate so it slips in. See how nice it just moved through there? And just slip that through. Line up the flats, make sure it's at the right height, and just push it home. There you go. And now we got to get the other one on the other side. But look at that, very cool hardtail section. Works with all your stock stuff, so you don't have to make a custom axle. You don't have to figure out custom axle adjusters. Everything that originally went with your motorcycle will just bolt right on. And you don't have to make any kind of wheel spacers.